This video was brought to you by Squarespace. The captain. Hold on, do I smell? Hold on, is that actually? No, that's definitely. You know, I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong, but I think I just might smell change in the air. Change with notes of hope. Pokemon Winds and Waves has finally, officially been revealed. And you know what? It looks pretty gall-darn good, doesn't it? I mean, it looks good. This comes as something of a surprise to many. One cannot help but recall the last generation of Pokemon, Scarlet and Violet. We've done the whole Scarlet and Violet tirade more than enough times by now, and yet I am still tempted to do it all over again. That is how strongly I feel, just how ridiculously unfinished the game was. I mean, I still liked it. I'm sorry. I did. I think the gameplay was pretty good. I think the world was okay. I really liked the story, but of course, in terms of graphics and performance, just an absolute trash fire. And that was just one example of our Pokemon-related woes during the Switch generation. I mean, the whole generation was just fraught with controversy. Pokemon's probably never been completely without its issues. I mean, what series is? But the transition to home console games was tough on Pokemon. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, it was an okay start. You know, like it wasn't the most ambitious remake ever, and I have some pretty serious complaints about the motion controls. I think that was pretty ridiculous, but like overall, reception was okay. It was pretty good. But man, things really went downhill from there. It was just controversy after controversy after controversy. Sword and Shield, that was a bad time. That was a really particularly bad time. I mean, that brought about Dexit, that whole thing, the idea that like all of these years you've been able to bring all your Pokemon with you, and now suddenly not every Pokemon is compatible with each new game. So that was a whole thing. There was all the whole stuff about how it looked like they were reusing old models when they had said that they weren't going to reuse old models. And then the game itself was just so incredibly cheap, so little content, so little story. Like it really was basically just a glorified Game Boy game, which was ridiculous as the first big new home console Pokemon generation. Then with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, instead of beautiful, content-rich modernizations, like big recreations of Diamond and Pearl, we got just like the cheapest, just laziest, ugliest recreations imaginable, not even bothering to pull content from Platinum. That was just unforgivable. Legends Arceus, on the other hand, that was a winner. I will always argue that Legends Arceus is just a good game. Not completely perfect. It could have looked a little bit better, but still, like, a lot to do. The gameplay, the new mechanics, like, to me, that was the real beginning of Pokemon actually being modernized and becoming the version of Pokemon that I had been wanting for so many years. So that was great. But then it was followed up by Legends ZA, which again I will argue is an okay game. I had fun with it. I actually do feel the same way about the active battle system. I think that that's it. That's what Pokemon needs. At least some version of Pokemon needs. That's a true modernization. That is a true modern Pokemon experience. That's great. But then, of course, the rest of the game was just cheap. Just cheap. Apparently, it had just this microscopic budget of only $14 million, which is really not a lot at all for a game like this. So the visuals were cheap, the content was like incredibly repetitive, even monotonous at times, and then the DLC was even worse. So just again and again and again, Pokemon just kept disappointing. The whole Pokemon conversation has been overwhelmingly negative for close to a decade now. Like basically since the Switch started to get Pokemon games, the whole discussion has just been bad. And like, sure, some of these discussions do get a little bit out of hand, a little bit of black and white thinking in there maybe, but I mean, the general consensus seems to have been Pokemon bad now, and yet... I think I may be smelling a little tiny bit of hope in the air. The tide may finally be turning. Before we continue, a moderately speedy reminder that this video was brought to you by Squarespace. Maybe you do fancy portraits of people's pet guinea pigs and you need a website for your portfolio, or a storefront for your discount carpet leftovers business, or a personal digital content library to keep track of all the videos you record of your garden gnomes. I don't know, live your best life. Whatever it is though, Squarespace will make it easy. Even if you've got no experience building websites, you've never written a line of code in your life, doesn't matter. Formatting and embedding and tweaking is all completely intuitive. You can even start with a template if you want, and very soon you'll find yourself looking at a slick, professional website. My site, Arlo Recommends, is a blog, and it's super easy to just draft up a whole bunch of posts all at once, schedule everything to automatically publish at a later date, or dates. It can even generate social media posts for me, and that's it. I've even got access to a whole suite of analytics so I can see how many people are visiting my site. And if I ever need more, Squarespace offers lots of powerful extensions, don't forget about those. To try out Squarespace for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. Then when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/Arlo to save 10% off your first website or domain. And now for today's recommendation, Pavilions by Johnny Woods. Really excellent synth album. Futuristic, but still very organic. It's just incredibly pleasant, very calming, and I found myself returning to it frequently since it released in 2020. Thanks again to Squarespace. You may now continue the video. You have earned it. It happened kind of fast, didn't it? September 2025, Nintendo Direct, they reveal Pokopia. And it looked really promising, but you know, of course, this is Pokemon we're talking about. People are gonna withhold judgment until they get their hands on the games themselves. And then they got their hands on the games themselves. And it's really good. Like, I'm still working on my full review, but like, spoiler alert, it's really super incredibly good. This is not a mainline traditional Pokemon game, but it's still a game that completely embodies the heart of the Pokemon experience. You know, it's not just a spin-off with Pokemon named slapped onto it. Or even just, you know, a genuine Pokemon spin-off where the gameplay is just too different to really actually feel like Pokemon. Pokopia really does feel like a Pokemon game, but in its own unique way, and it's just incredible. So that's good, and then at the time of this recording, Pokemon Champions is pretty close to releasing, and we've been waiting a while for this one, but I mean, response to everything we've seen so far has been rather positive. This is something that feels like it's been kind of a long time coming, you know, rather than splitting competition between all these different games and having to have these like competitive multiplayer formats between each new generation. You can have one unified competitive format, this free-to-play title where people can use Pokemon Home to bring in their Pokemon from all over, new standard for competitive play, and we still, at the time of this recording, we don't know how many Pokemon will be compatible with the game, but I have to imagine that the goal will be to have all Pokemon compatible, at least eventually. And if that happens, is it possible that that may kind of make up for the whole Dexit thing? At least a tiny bit, like just at least a bit. If at least in the competitive world, you can have all of your Pokemon in one place and actually use them, maybe. So yeah, Champions, that's another really good thing. And then there's Winds and Waves. Nothing mind-blowing in that trailer, doesn't set the world on fire, barely even gives us that much of an idea of like what the game is gonna be like, but like solid. Like it just looks good. As I said in my reveal reaction stuff, there's no red flags, you know, and that's for Pokemon, that's pretty good. I don't know. At least at the moment, I'm not catching any red flags. There is nothing yet to indicate that there's gonna be some sort of big problem, at least with like how it runs and how it looks. Even better though, it's not even releasing in 2026 as we all expected. I mean, not even expected. I think we would pretty much bet anything on it. We were sure it was gonna launch in 2026, but no, it's been pushed into 2027. And normally Pokemon, they stick to those deadlines. They've got to have a Pokemon game out every holiday season. Each new generation has to like fit within a certain time frame, and that's been one of their big problems. And it's even more surprising considering we have reason to believe that Legend ZA was finished like kind of a long time ago, and they just sat on it for a while. So you would think that that would really open up time for them to finish Winds and Waves and get it out by holiday 26. But no, it's coming out in 2027. We don't know when in 2027, but it would be pretty surprising if they didn't hit that holiday window. So maybe, well, I can't get my hopes up, but just maybe this means that they're actually just giving the game time to cook, the time that it needs to be a full, complete game that runs well and has enough content, etc. And that idea by itself, just the simple fact that the game isn't coming out in 2026, that itself is kind of encouraging. So after a whole entire generation of Pokemon being bad, all of a sudden, things are just kind of looking up. I mean, it really felt so sudden to hammer in the thematic metaphors. It was practically as sudden as the wind changing direction. But of course, we cannot get ahead of ourselves. Right now, the future of Pokemon feels brighter than it has in ages, like surprisingly bright, all things considered. But we really have to consider, we really have to closely examine if it could actually be true that Pokemon is becoming good again. Well, on the positive side, it certainly is true that right now we are looking at 3 games, all relatively close to each other, that are ticking all the right boxes. One released already, and it's great. I mean, even greater than we expected. We've got another that's close to release and looks really good. And then another that's, it's gonna take a while, but looks really promising. And again, just the fact that they seem to be giving it plenty of development time, that itself is promising as well. At this moment in time, Pokemon-related controversy is weirdly absent. I mean, it's kind of making me nervous, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's just like the big caveat about some of these projects. I don't know, but it hasn't happened yet. And like the Switch generation was really, really rough, like way too rough, but it wasn't literally all bad. I mean, like absolutely way too much junk to wade through, too many controversies, but there was good stuff in there. Pokemon knows how to make a good game when they want to. Again, Let's Go was not bad. Arceus, I thought that was just good. Real breath of fresh air. Scarlet and Violet ran terribly, looked terrible, but again, I thought there were really good things about it. I still enjoyed it pretty well. And then ZA, really cheap, just unabashedly cheap, but there was some really incredibly good stuff in there. That active combat, I love it. So there's been this idea that maybe it really was that jump to Switch that caused all of these well, not like caused the problems, but kind of helped the problems arise. The real problem is with the Pokemon company itself, but maybe the jump to Switch didn't help. Game Freak had been making handheld games for so many years, iterating so slowly, and then all of a sudden they were putting their games on what was basically a home console. Maybe they didn't have the infrastructure or the experience. And that's not a good excuse. Of course, they could have done a lot more to prepare for this. They could have seen this coming. That's kind of what a professional company is supposed to do. But even if it was a bad excuse, maybe that was a big part of the problem. Some of these games ran poorly, looked pretty bad because they didn't know how to code for this more powerful hardware, but then the hardware itself wasn't so powerful that they could just brute force all of this and get it to run. And sure, performance wasn't the only problem. These games were really inconsistent in just about any area you can think of. But maybe that was still something of a symptom of the performance problem. They struggled with budgeting or time management or something. So I don't know, it could be possible that just because the Switch 2 is a lot more powerful, now they've got more to work with, this may enable them to make better games kind of across the board. And if that's the case, then yes, this definitely could be something of a new era of sorts. If during the Switch generation, overall development was kind of weird, kind of hindered in various ways, but now they've kind of got it down. They've got a better development pipeline, less R&D going into creating these new systems and modeling all the new Pokemon and all that stuff. I don't know, just maybe they're opening up more time for themselves overall. They've kind of laid the groundwork. And now that they've done that, things may be a lot more consistent. However, sorry to have to get to this part, but we do need to be realistic. Recency bias is absolutely a thing. I don't know if it's the internet or the phones or the TikTok or what, but many of us have microscopic attention spans. Recent events feel like they make up all of history. if a couple similar things happen in a row, it feels like it's the new normal. Everything is this way now. Pokemon puts out some stinkers, there's some controversies in there. Well, suddenly every game is a stinker. Pokemon has been bad for a few years. No, Pokemon has been bad for decades. It's always been bad. So yeah, Pokemon making a few good decisions, even making a few good games, even if they're all in a row, kind of close together, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the way things are going to stay. This is still the Pokemon Company we're talking about. Them spending only $14 million on Legends ZA had nothing to do with the Switch's hardware power. That was a calculated decision. They knew that they could make this game and absolutely cheap out on it, and we would still buy it, and so they would make even more money. At the heart of every single bad thing that's happened to Pokemon over the last several years has been greed and poor decision making. It ain't the ship that's the problem. It ain't even the crew. It's the captain. And those metaphorical captains are still captaining. If we know that they are capable of making the kinds of decisions that they have made thus far, we have no real reason to believe they're not gonna make more of those decisions. And I hate to say it, but especially because during the Switch generation, they really pushed the limits. Like, that whole thing was just one giant test. How far can we go? How cheap can we make the products? How unfinished can they be? How high can we make the prices? How far can we toe that line and still get paid? And unfortunately, the answer was, of course, as far as they want. There is a chance that this ray of sunshine, this glimmer of hope, is a fluke. The eye of the storm. And yeah, Winds and Waves looks promising. It's nice that they're not releasing the game until next year, but we really don't know anything about the game. The very next trailer could spark some huge outrage, or some announcement, or rumor, or leak, just anything. And then just as suddenly, Pokemon is back to being bad again. So while I think it's a little bit too early to make the call that this is Pokemon's triumphant return at last, a return to the glory days, a new golden era for the series, I do certainly think that it's possible that things could be looking up. I want to take more of a wait-and-see, middle ground kind of approach, but I think cautious optimism is warranted here. I do think the Pokemon Company is probably going to continue being the Pokemon Company and capable of the same grossness that we have seen, for lack of a better word. But I also think that the Switch generation might have been a weird transition time for them. I just wouldn't be surprised if they really learned from it, kind of established a new workflow and hopefully built up their teams. That would certainly be nice. And maybe now they will be better at delivering good products. At least I can hope. Yep, I think that may just be hope I smell. Oh, no, never mind. That was me. Oof.